Hey guys, Lord Naren, White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God. Back with you with the next video in my Daily Diary series. As usual, before I discuss what I have achieved since yesterday's Daily Diary video, I want to read you a chapter from the Bible. Today it will be the book of Esther, chapter 8. On that day did the king Ahasuerus give the house of Haman, the Jews' enemy, unto Esther the queen. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was unto her. And the king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it unto Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. And Esther spake yet again before the king, and fell down at his feet, and besought him with tears to put away the mischief of Haman the Agagite, and his device that he had despised against the Jews. Then the king held out the golden scepter toward Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king, and said, If it please the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the thing seem right before the king, and I be pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to reverse the letters devised by Haman the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews which are in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that shall come unto my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred? Then the king Ahasuerus said unto Esther the queen, and to Mordecai the Jew, Behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and him they have hanged upon the gallows, because he laid his hand upon the Jews. Write ye also for the Jews as it liketh you in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring, for the writing which is written in the king's name, and sealed with the king's ring, may no man reverse. Then were the king's scribes called at that time the 3rd month, that is, the month Sivan, on the 23 day thereof. And it was written, according to all that Mordecai commanded unto the Jews, and to the lieutenants and the deputies and rulers of the provinces, which are from India unto Ethiopia, 127 provinces, unto every province according to the writing thereof, and unto every people after their language, and to the Jews according to their writing and according to their language. And he wrote in the king Ahasuerus' name, and sealed it with the king's ring, and sent letters by post on horseback, and riders on mules, camels, and young dromedaries, wherein the king granted the Jews which were in every city to gather themselves together, and to stand for their life, to destroy, to slay, and to cause to perish all the power of the people and province that would assault them, both little ones and women, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. Upon one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, namely upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, the copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, and that the Jews should be ready against that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. So the post that rode upon mules and camels went out, being hastened on by the king's commandment, and the decree was given at Shushan the palace. And Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal apparel of blue and white, and with a great crown of gold, and with a garment of fine linen and purple, and the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. The Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. And in every province and in every city, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day. And many of the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews fell upon them. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So, this chapter clearly demonstrates the coming full circle of the end of the terror brought forth by Haman, where the letters were sent to all provinces to persecute the Jews. And because, of course, obviously all glory be to God, because of Esther's great works, by the grace of God, all of this was able to be undone. And so, of course, to God be the glory. And I look at it now and I say, reading this chapter, that what an amazing influence just one woman had in the history of the world. And I say that because a few times in the book of Esther, I've talked about how, as Lord Naren White, I talk about my ultimate goal, which is the siring of my sons into the world, starting, of course, with one son, not to get ahead of myself. But of course, at this point, I'm amassing capital to have enough money that I feel confident to push forward to the next stage of my goals. And the goal from there being that, the siring of my sons, and of course, I will be adopting daughters. I'll be adopting daughters. I will not be. So that's the idea there. And one of the goals I talk about with the adoption of my daughters is, first, I want them, to marry. Like, I want my sons to be able to marry within my faith. That's very important to me. From a trust perspective, from a furthering of the faith perspective, you name it. And the second is that does probably factor, with in vitro fertilization costing more than adoption. Probably I might have, and being more difficult in terms of like the time required. Like, you think about it, the child must grow 9 months, but there are plenty more babies to adopt, should you want, than waiting 9 months each time, which is obviously very appealing because those are children are from me, so that's obviously very appealing. And the idea being that if I do end up raising more daughters than sons, that I hope that they take a course in their life like Esther, where typically what I've seen is that it's easier for a woman of a lower class to marry a higher class man. See Cinderella, for example, but it's often quite rare, like Cinderella finding Prince Charming or something. But it's quite rare that, or Snow White and Prince Charming also. But it's quite rare that, or Sleeping Beauty. Either way, I'm not really sure which of the Disney fairy tales. I know Cinderella for sure, but I think I'm confusing maybe Snow White and Sleeping Beauty. I'm not sure. But that idea being that it's easier for a woman who doesn't have money to meet a man that does, for example, than a man who doesn't have money to meet a woman who does. That's typically been my experience, is that the first of those is more common. And it's not about the money. I talk about I would be looking for, men who can provide and protect my daughter. So, whatever that really entails, I'll get to that place when I get there. But I'm saying that now because of the fact that there are many reasons I'm going with this approach. And one of them is demonstrated in the book of Esther, where we see that, and I don't think this is, like a light thing to say. I don't say this lightly, considering the time period that this took place in is not, modern, the modern world. And, in terms of like women's rights, for example, of course, like, for example, like women can vote and things like that in the USA today, right? After women's suffrage, and I don't remember what year, but 1910 something, I think, women were given the right to vote in the USA. But I say that because Esther, in this time period, so King Ahasuerus is definitely the most powerful man in the kingdom, but I don't think, from what I'm reading, it sounds too crazy to believe that Esther has demonstrated that she is the second most powerful person in the kingdom. And typically with a king and a queen, you might believe that's true, but Esther, as a woman, she does not have the same privilege as a man, traditionally. And she's still able to do so much good for her people by virtue of being the queen, by virtue of being married to Ahasuerus, and achieving great things for her people, and most of all for her God. And we see here that one of my favorite passages here is Esther 8:17, where it says, "And many of the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews fell upon them." And that is actually because of the work of Esther. And that's why I say, for one day, when I adopt my daughters, that I look forward to reading the book of Esther with them, so they understand that, if they ever feel, a lot of times girls you may hear like girls feel that they feel sexism or things like that. If my daughters ever say they're feeling like difficulty being a woman, I'll point them back to the book of Esther and say, look at how powerful Esther is by doing her duty, and she ends up, furthering God's kingdom on the earth um, through her efforts. And with that, I will go ahead and end the Daily Dive video there for today and transition over to what I have achieved since yesterday's Daily Dive video. Since yesterday's Daily Dive video, I worked my software developer job. I worked at my core. I uploaded and scheduled the Daily Dive video for 5/4/23, and I have created, uploaded, and will schedule this Daily Dive video for 5/5/23. And with no further achievements since yesterday's Daily Dive video, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light to be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.